Welcome back to FUNNELIZE. JK with you here, and I'm really excited to walk you through my webinar funnel. Now, we're actually going to go through the individual pages that I talked about inside the funnel map video that you saw on this page here, but I want to go through a couple of house cleaning items just before we do that. The first one is, if you have gone through one of my webinar funnels before, and maybe if you've purchased something, thanks for doing that, but you're going to notice that there's a few differences here. Now, the reason for that is because I am a huge numbers geek. I am such a dork. I love looking at heat maps and analytics and conversion rates and stick rates and attendance rates and all that kind of stuff. I'm really into that. I'm kind of a data scientist in my part-time. So I really love looking at all that stuff, and that changes how some of my pages look. So if you're looking at this thinking, well, when I went through this, the page looked a bit different, that's okay. Don't worry about that. I change this kind of stuff regularly, but the overall shape of the funnel always stays the same. So the pages might look a little bit different, but the overall shape is always the same. Now, the other thing I want to point out is that 99% of the time, I don't run my funnel gateway traffic into a webinar funnel. I'm not saying that that's the right way or the wrong way to do it. All I'm saying is that's not how I personally do it. I like to send any traffic from my funnel gateway into a tripwire funnel. The reason I like to do that is because I do most of my paid advertising through Facebook and YouTube, and Facebook and YouTube advertising works really well with a tripwire funnel because it's self-liquidating. You're making your money back from your paid advertising almost immediately, and that in a lot of cases gives you the feeling of having free advertising. If I look back at all the advertising that I've run, I might spend $500 or $600 per day in advertising sometimes, but I'm never actually spending that amount. By the time the day is over, I've made $500 or $600. So I'm actually spending no money on my paid advertising. So I run my funnel gateway into a tripwire funnel rather than a webinar funnel. So that's important to point out. So I'm not going to show you the funnel gateway into my webinar funnel because I don't really have one. The way I put my traffic into my webinar funnel is through email marketing. So when people go through my tripwire funnel, I use email marketing to push them into the webinar registration page, and then obviously that takes them all the way through the webinar funnel. I do use retargeting ads as well to push people into the webinar registration page, but I don't run cold traffic to a webinar. Anyone who's going to see an ad for one of my webinars is either on my list already, there's someone who has visited a boost page of mine somewhere else in a different funnel gateway. Anytime I run traffic to a webinar, it's generally warm traffic, someone who has known me, they're on my list, they might have purchased something or something like that. I just find that running cold traffic to a webinar registration page, if you're using paid ads, can be hella expensive, and it's really hard to make your money back on that. So I'm going to show you my webinar registration page that I send traffic to from email marketing. So that housekeeping being said, this is my webinar registration page. It changes up here and there, but for the most part, it's going to always look like this. So it says here, the strategy that helped me get a great ROI on every Facebook ads campaign, step-by-step instructions. I'll take you by the hand and teach you how to apply this strategy into your own business starting tomorrow. Now, there's always going to be two registration buttons, one at the top, one at the bottom. There's always going to be bullet points saying what you're actually going to learn during the workshop. And then generally I'll have the time that the actual event is going to happen. Now, this registration page you see right here is for an evergreen webinar. Now that means that the webinar has already been recorded, it's already been edited, it's ready to go in the background, ready to be streamed whenever. There's two ways to use an evergreen webinar. There's the way that I'm currently doing this, where I'm making people wait for a day before they watch the event. And the other way to do it is, which is probably pretty common, you've probably seen this before, where you're actually able to click the register now button and the event is happening 15 minutes from now, or it's happening 15 minutes past the hour on whatever time you're looking at. I don't like to use the 15-minute webinar because the kind of traffic I'm sending into my webinar funnel is from my email list. So I already have that relationship with them. I don't need to catch their attention right away. I find it's much more beneficial to make them wait for a day or sometimes 2 days or 3 days even, so that I can give them the pre-webinar training content that we're going to look at in a second here. And that really helps build up the hype, build up the expectations, and help with keeping people on the webinar and getting people to actually show up. If you go with a webinar that's going to start in 15 minutes, you'll get a lot of people show up to the webinar because it's, people are happy to wait just 15 minutes to see the content, but a lot of people will drop out. So that's why I like to use not the 15-minute strategy. I like to use the strategy where when they click on register now, they're actually going to see events for when the workshop is happening tomorrow or sometimes the day after that. So that's just something I wanted to point out here. Depending on the webinar registration software that you are actually using, that might not be an option for you anyway. You might not be able to run a webinar starting in the next 15 minutes. You might not be able to run an evergreen webinar. Maybe your software only lets you run a live webinar. In that case, using this page is obviously still fine. You would just use, you'd put the actual date and time that the webinar is actually going to happen. So that's something really important that I do want to point out here. For this particular workshop, I put in the actual points of what people are actually going to see when they show up to the live webinar, and then there's another register now button at the bottom of the page. So once they go and register, remember the webinar is going to happen a day after they actually register for this. So keep that in mind as we go through the funnel here. They're going to come onto the webinar confirmation page. So let's bring up the webinar confirmation page here. And this is what the webinar confirmation page actually looks like. Very, very simple. We don't even really have a headline. It's just an acknowledgement that everything has gone through, everything works. I have a 2-minute video here where I thank them for registering. I basically go back and mention again the different topics that we're going to talk about inside of the workshop. And then I give them a worksheet, because the goal of this workshop is to talk to people who have run Facebook ads or are running Facebook ads, but they're not getting the kind of results that they want. So on the thank you page, on the confirmation page, I actually give them the option to download a worksheet where they can go and basically fill in a couple of things that they think they've identified as stopping them from getting really good results with Facebook ads. So before we continue, let me just go back to the map here. We've looked at the registration page, we've looked at the confirmation page, and this retargeting element here is really important. So I will retarget any traffic that comes to the webinar registration page but does not come onto the confirmation page. So if, say, 60 people, actually I think, here we go, let me show you here. If 60 people come onto this page here, and I have a page view pixel right here, 60 people come on here, but only 40 people come onto this page right here, I will actually run a retargeting ad to everybody who did not make it to this page, because clearly that means that they saw the registration, but they did not register for it. So I'm going to run an ad to say, hey, don't forget to sign up for this, blah, 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 and get them back onto this page with the goal of getting them to register, which then takes them onto this page. So the ad will not show to anybody who has been on this page, because obviously if they're on this page, they've registered for the webinar. So that's how that retargeting works. And again, we're going to go through retargeting in much, much, much more detail as we go through the rest of FUNNELIZE. And I've actually got videos dedicated to setting it all up and all that stuff. So if the idea of retargeting is overwhelming for you right now, don't worry. It's going to be really, really easy to go through much, much later. So that's the webinar confirmation page. Then we have webinar pre-training. So remember, in the previous video, I told you that I'm going to send emails to people who actually registered for the webinar, and sometimes I'll use retargeting as well to get people onto pre-training pages. And these pre-training pages, they will look something like this. Just a super, super simple page. It's going to have a headline, it's going to have a video, and generally there'll be a link to other videos that they can go and watch. In this case, it's down the bottom here. So in this case, I have a video here showing them how to make the top 4 performing Facebook ads. I will send them an email saying, hey, before the webinar, I want to share with you a really cool bonus training video. Go and watch this video before the webinar, because I'm going to show you how to make the top 4 performing ads that we're going to talk about on the actual workshop. So they'll come in here, they'll take a look at the video, they'll see how that works. There's another video down here that they can watch, part 1. This is actually part 2, just the way I've scheduled this out, don't worry about it. But they're going to see another video here, which is an explanation of what the top 4 performing ads are. And then they can also download an ad that I actually reference inside of this video right here, which is about 5,000 characters or 1,000 words or something like that, where it actually goes through and explains how I get people from Facebook into my funnel. So that's really helpful. If people have come onto this page where they can see that there's going to be a workshop about Facebook ads, they register for it. So they get onto this page here, they're ready to go, they're excited, they get the worksheet, they identify what the problems are with their Facebook ads, and then I send them an email roughly a couple hours, or maybe a couple hours after they register or a couple hours before the event, and say, hey, check out this video, because I'm going to actually show you how to make the top 4 performing ads, which are so, so important. And then they can actually go and watch that video. So that's the webinar pre-training stuff that happens. Then I have more emails that go out to them that's saying, hey, 12 hours before the event, we're happening in 12 hours, we're launching in 6 hours, the webinar is happening in 4 hours, well, probably not 4 hours, the webinar is starting in 15 minutes, and boom, the webinar has already started. So all that's scheduled to happen out automatically. These emails actually come from my webinar software, which is called Webinar Jam, but you can also do this from your autoresponder. So if your webinar software doesn't let you send out emails, that's fine. You can just do this through your autoresponder as well. Just create a little campaign. It's really, really simple to do. Then they actually come into the live event. I don't have a page for that because obviously that happens inside of Webinar Jam in my case, or it could happen inside of Demio. Whichever webinar software you're using, that's going to be, you know, a page that exists specifically for that webinar. Remember, mine is evergreen, so I'm not actually there. It just looks like I'm there. So all that happens completely automatically. And after the live webinar, they then go and see a webinar replay page. So after the live webinar, emails automatically start going out from, in this case, my webinar platform, but it could be from your autoresponder. You're sending out emails saying the webinar replay is up. It's staying up for 4 days. 3 days left, 2 days left, 1 day left, it's coming down tonight, boom, the webinar replay is gone. And the webinar replay is where you're actually going to make way more sales than you would during the live webinar, because sometimes people can't attend the live webinar for different reasons. So the webinar replay is actually where you're going to make a lot of sales. I also use this retargeting here to get people onto the webinar replay. So this retargeting audience here is people who landed on this page, the webinar confirmation page, but they did not show up inside the live webinar. So there, let's say 100 people landed on the webinar confirmation page. The only way people can get here is by registering. So if 100 people are on this page and only 50 people show up to the live webinar, that means 50 people I can go and retarget to get them to come to the webinar replay. So most webinar software will let you put a pixel inside the live webinar room, it's called, and I will basically create a retargeting audience based on people who show up here but do not show up here will get an ad sending them over here to the webinar replay page. And the webinar replay page looks like this. Go back to the top here. So this is the format that I use. This is not my format. I actually learned this from Mike Filsame from a product called Webinar Control. And this is basically a timer at the top. This timer will be based on generally 4 days after the live webinar. That's when the webinar replay page comes down. So we have a little headline, this crazy one-time special expires shortly. Again, this is built in ClickFunnels. Everything I've showed you here is built in ClickFunnels. Facebook Masters Training Program got a headline very similar to the headline that is actually on the registration page. Because remember, if they didn't see the pre-training, I want to remind them what this is actually about. Then I have the actual training itself, the actual webinar training video. I put in a table of contents to show people what's actually happening. So 7 minutes and 50 seconds in, here's this content, 8 minutes in, blah, blah, blah. So they can actually go ahead and they can buffer their way through the video to find what they're most interested in. I actually think that's a really helpful idea. Some people don't want to do that because they think, well, people are just going to skip over this and that. It's a customer experience thing, right? I mean, if someone didn't want to watch the live webinar because they just didn't feel like they had time, you want to let them kind of skip through to what they think is going to be important, right? Then down underneath that, I actually have a separate video, which is just a video of the actual recap of what the master's training actually is. And again, I have another table of contents here. So I actually explain, 1 minute in, 4 minutes in, 5 minutes in, everything that they're actually getting. So this video itself, they can go through and watch the whole thing, or they can skip to, maybe they already saw the live event, but they just want to remember, oh, what was in module 3? And they can go in here and say, oh, module 3, 4 minutes. They can just skip over to 4 minutes and they can watch a recap of what that part of the product actually is. So this is the sales pitch video right here. And this is like the content or training part of the video right here. So then down here, I put in a summary of everything that they're able to purchase. I have some video or written testimonials of what people think of the product. So I've been selling this product for quite a while, so I have quite a lot of video testimonials and written testimonials of what people think about the product. I have obviously the buy button here for people to go and purchase the product. And then I have any refund policies or anything like that down at the bottom right here. So this is the replay page that I use. A lot of people, when they send people to a webinar replay, they will just basically send them to a page with a video on it, and then maybe there's a buy button underneath. That works sometimes. This page right here, this is what will get you 5 times, 6 times the amount of sales that you get when you send people over to the live webinar. So if you get 1 or 2 sales on your live webinar for, say, a $1,000 product, if you use retargeting ads and email marketing and you send them to a webinar replay page that looks like this, that's where you're going to get an extra 4, 5, or 6 sales easily of $1,000 each just from sending traffic over to this page because it looks good and it has everything on here that people would want. So the people who just want the content, they're able to come onto this page, they can find the content, they're going to love you for that because they just want to learn. Maybe they don't have the money to invest right now. Down here, the people who are actually interested in buying but they can't quite remember all the details, they can watch this video, go through this table of contents to look at all the information here. They can go through, see a quick summary, they can see social proof over here, and then they can click on the big button to go and buy the product. So that is the webinar replay page, and that's basically the end of the webinar funnel. So I send them into my webinar registration page, and after they come on here, they register for the event that's happening tomorrow. This brings them onto the webinar confirmation page, which is the second part of our funnel. I'll use retargeting ads to make sure anyone who lands here, I want to run ads to them to get them onto this page. Then I will send them emails to get them onto the webinar pre-training content, which is usually 1 to 2 videos explaining to them, more details about the workshop and what's coming up. They'll then go to the actual live event, and then we send them over to the all-important webinar replay page. And this is where, honestly, you're going to make most of your sales is from the webinar replay page. And particularly if you have it look like this, where you've got all this content, all this information, you've got social proof and everything on here, this is where you make 2, 3, and 4 times the amount of sales that you made on the live webinar. So that is a breakdown of the webinar funnel. Thanks so much for watching this walkthrough. My name is JK Daddle. I'll see you inside the next funnel right here in FUNNELIZE.